Hello, there we are. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for saying hello. Did you see we're getting a new street sign? Look at it when you drive out. It's only like 60% done. It's all the money we had. I'm teasing, it's not really all the money we had. It's just in progress. Wanted you to know about it. And also wanted to use it to take the opportunity to tell you that anytime you see anything happening anywhere in this community, it's because good people have given their time and their talents, their Saturdays, and their financial resources to help keep this thing in motion so that people can find the love of God in a space that will be safe for them. So that's why I get to be the grateful pastor here at Edges. My name is Kelly Shushak. I don't know if I said that earlier. We're in the middle of this series, and this one's been kind of like a mirror for many of us. You know, something you can look at and see yourself. The series is called Flawed but Faithful. That's like many of us, right? I think many of us feel more flawed than faithful, especially when we're talking about forging a relationship with Jesus. Right? So I think one question that's kind of rung throughout this whole series is, does that count a person out? When you're more flawed but faithful, when you're more flawed than faithful, does it count a person out? So we've been looking at this biblical character, and this guy has maybe a similar flawed, faithful ratio to the one some of us have. And we're looking at him to see whether anybody who's more flawed than they are faithful can find a way to stay true to Jesus. Well, I think today's passage presents probably the biggest letdown in the whole story. Aren't you glad you came? We've been watching it over the past several weeks. Let me offer a little recap for those of you who haven't been here consistently. Well, that was no slam on you, by the way. That really sounded like the kind of thing your mother would say to you, didn't it? Yeah. Anyway, back to the recap. Jesus has been walking closely with Peter, the guy we're talking about, and his other disciples. And he's been showing them who he is. He's been involving them in the kinds of stuff God wants to do in the world. And he's been inviting them little by little to commit to his way of life. To commit to the way of life that is shaped by love and justice and forgiveness and mercy and dependence on God. And all of this together is changing what they think the world looks like. They're learning to live this way, and it's making them see the world differently. And in addition, they've been racking up all these undeniable miracle moments. So there was that first unbelievable boat trip we talked about where their nets were just bursting with fish. Then there was another boat trip where Peter actually walked on top of the water. Then there was that day where Jesus promised to build the church with Peter. And that was the day. We talked about it last week. That was the day where it hit Peter. It hit Peter that his friend and mentor truly was the Son of God. The one that they've been praying for and waiting for and hoping for and looking out for their whole lives. So last week we got to watch that moment where Peter bought in. In that moment, Jesus asked him, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter realized he had an answer. He knew in his bones that Jesus was the Son of God. Finally, he was faithful. Don't you kind of wonder what happens next? If no one says yes, we'll stop here. Okay. Today, we get to go back with those same characters. And we're going to hear another story, only you should know that while all those great things have been happening, in the background, things have been heating up for Jesus. The way Jesus has been living is upsetting the norm. so much so that it's threatening to topple the power structures of the day, both the religious sphere and the political sphere. And so Jesus knows that he's about to get to be the fall guy. So he gathers his friends for a very important dinner, one that today we remember as the Last Supper. He serves his friends bread and wine, and then he talks rather cryptically about his own forthcoming death. And after that time communion together, in fact, directly after that time of communion, we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 26, beginning with verse 31. This passage, we're going to talk about it today, and by that I mean you're going to get to talk about it, so I hope you'll find it as riveting as I do. And I've asked a few people to help read some of the parts in the passage just so perhaps we can embody it a little bit more together. So if you guys will come. From verse 31. Then Jesus said to his disciples,
"Tonight you will all fall away because of me. This is because it is written, 'I will hit the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will go off in all directions.'"
So here Jesus is quoting to them their scriptures, what they have inside of them. He's connecting the dots that he is the shepherd who will be struck down. And they are the sheep who are going to run for cover. Then he says,
"But after I'm raised up, I'll go before you to Galilee."
So newly faithful people, Peter, he just cannot take it another minute. "What do you mean you're going to be struck and we're going to flee?" Peter replies,
"If everyone else stumbles because of you, I'll never stumble."
And Jesus said to him,
"I assure you that before the rooster crows tonight, you will deny me 3 times.
And Peter said,
"Even if I must die alongside you, I won't deny you."
and all the disciples said the same thing. So what happens next is kind of this cascading scandal. Jesus invites these guys to go and pray with him. Only it's late now. And what do you do when it's late? You go to sleep. So that's what the disciples do. And just when Jesus gets up from praying, he goes and finds them snoring. He wakes them up. And at that moment, this huge and powerful crowd shows up. And they arrest Jesus, and they take him immediately to a religious trial. But Peter's still trying to wake up. He doesn't understand what's happened, and he can't believe what's happening, so he does what he knows to do. He gets up and he follows this huge mob down the street and all the way to the courtyard of the high priest where the trial is about to take place. Only he can't get in because he's not on trial yet. And he sits outside then with the officers who are there, the ones who have arrested Jesus, to just wait and see how things will turn out. Listen. Meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard when a servant woman came up to him and said,
"You were also with Jesus, the Galilean."
But he denied it in front of all of them, saying,
"I don't know what you're talking about."
So here I see Peter starting to panic. He gets up, he looks through the gate, he's trying to regain eye contact with Jesus, any contact with Jesus, because he is desperate to figure out, what does faithful look like in this moment? Verse 71, then he went over to the gate, and another woman saw him and said to those who were there,
"This man was with Jesus, the man from Nazareth."
Oh, so the stakes are rising now. The woman is talking louder. Did you see? Now she's talking to everyone. But verse 72, with a solemn pledge, he denied it again, saying,
"I don't know the man."
A short time later, those standing there came, and they all said to Peter,
"You must be one of them. The way you talk gives you away."
So then he cursed and he swore.
"I don't know the man."
At that very moment, the rooster crowed. Verse 75. Peter remembered Jesus' words.
"Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
And Peter went out, and he cried uncontrollably. Why? What makes a person weep without filters over a decision they've made? What makes a person like Peter weep without filters over a decision they've made? Or maybe, what do you think is happening in Peter when he realizes Jesus' words have come true? What do you think is happening in Peter when he realizes that Jesus' words have come true? That's a question I think we all need some help with, so we're going to talk about it in groups this morning. It's very easy the way we do it at Edges. In a moment, I'll ask you to gather in groups of 5 or 6. I see many people in the room for the first time, so thanks for including them into your groups. When we get in groups, we just talk about the question that's on screen for about 3 minutes, and then I'll call you back. All you need to do is just make sure you know each other's names, and then feel free to talk or listen, whatever comes most comfortably to you this morning. Let me let you go parse out. What do you think is happening in Peter when he realizes Jesus' words have come true? Go. Fifteen seconds, guys. gathered back. Okay. Good job. Thanks for taking the time to really talk about the questions so that we can embody the scriptures that we hear each week together. The question I asked you to think about in your groups is, what do you think is happening in Peter when he realizes Jesus' words have come true? If you heard something you think could help inform the morning and you can say it in a soundbite, would you please call some of those answers out? What's happening in Peter when he realizes Jesus' words have come true? Guilt. Regret. Panic. The realization that promises are easy when you don't know the cost. He's not in control. He realizes he is not in control. He is not the person he thought he was. Maybe Jesus knows him better than he knows himself. He's coming to grips with the fact, sorry?
That Jesus isn't bringing down heaven. He's just letting what's happening happen.
Yeah. He's coming to the realization that Jesus will let the chips fall. Yeah. Hang on. Is that you, Emerson? Yeah. Disappointment. Thank you. The realization that Jesus was right and that there must be a bigger reason, a bigger something at play. Maybe that some hope could come that if this was right, that the other things Jesus promises may also be right. Anything else you think he's feeling in this moment? Yeah. Is this it? Is this over? Yeah. That was fast. Yeah, things have... Yeah. Filled with shame. Yeah. I think you knew those answers because we've been in those moments. I think Peter wept because he acted contrary to who he was. And it undid him. Peter had fallen for a life with Jesus. Peter had signed on to live by the laws of justice and forgiveness. Peter had fallen in love with kindness and with mercy. Peter had learned to believe in miracles, and he was beginning to actually trust the Son of God. That's who he was. He had become a Christ follower at his core. Until he got scared. Until it looked like it would get him into big trouble. Until he looked around and it seemed he might have to take the fall for someone he swore he would stay true to just moments ago. He just couldn't do it. He let his first impulse for self-protection, his urge to stay in the shadows, maybe even his rationale that Jesus didn't need him to speak the truth, at least not in this precarious moment. Peter let the lesser values carry the day. And he wept when that sunk in. When he realized that his choice had been to either stay in control or to stay in love. And he chose to stay in control. In that move, Peter sacrificed the one thing that no one could ever take from him. He gave it up. Peter sacrificed his conviction. Peter sacrificed his truth. Peter sacrificed his trust that he could not lose if he stuck with Jesus. When has your conviction hung in the balance? If ever there was a biblical passage that God is living in and waiting for us to live in too, it must be this one. And if it's true, if this passage is true for us, it means God will have something to say through these scriptures, and it'll be quite different for every one of us. That's how big God is. Well, here's one message I hear that seems so scandalous and so scary and so alive to me personally that I've tried to ignore it all week. So I'd like to just throw it on top of you in case perhaps it was a word for you and not for me. If Peter truly is a mirror, then I can look at his story and I can see how it's very important for a person to walk with, to talk with, to watch, to study, to spend time with Jesus. Because when a person starts there, before long, she'll find inside herself a life that is so full of meaning, so full of kindness and mercy and forgiveness and hope. It'll be the kind of life where every ordinary place she looks seems like it's full of God. Like Jesus is there just showing her how to do the kind of stuff that really matters, and all of it will. If Peter really is a mirror, then I can look at his life and see that Jesus will not expect a person to be only faithful. But he'll want her to be. Not because he's so demanding, but because he knows how it will feel to her to sacrifice the truth she's come to know. He'll want her to be faithful for her sake. If Peter is a mirror, I can look at his life and I can see that it's also important for a person to wake up and pray with Jesus. Because one day, maybe even one day very soon, Jesus and all the stuff he represents may wind up on the chopping block. And that's the moment when a person will need every holy imprint that is already in her heart, because there won't be much time for thinking new thoughts when they come out of nowhere to ask her, whose side are you on? If Peter is a mirror, I can look at his life and see that what a person will want to do at the climax of a moment like that, in the middle of a conviction scandal, what a person will want to do at that moment is disappear in the night, or say nothing, or even tell a lie. Because she'll be telling herself she should save her solidarity for a less combustible moment when things die down a little bit. Even though it's pretty clear that Jesus could use a few good friends to speak on his behalf. And if Peter is a mirror, I can look at his life and see that a person who acts contrary to who she is as a follower of Jesus will be the architect of her own undoing. She'll be guilty. She'll be filled with regret. She'll live in panic. She may realize she's not the person she thought she was. She may feel disappointed. She may wonder, is this it? She may be filled with shame. Jesus doesn't want her to live that way. Not for his sake, but for hers. Jesus wants us to stay true for our sakes. But if Peter is a mirror, then I can look at his life and I can see that maybe, just maybe, there's a less flawed choice than Peter made. Yes, it'll be a choice that, like his, looks awfully scary. But maybe there is a less flawed choice that will not actually topple her. Maybe if a person knows Peter's story, she can let the God she has learned to trust whisper a different, more faithful ending. Maybe if she knows Peter's story, she can make her own different choice at that moment. Maybe she can make a choice where she finds courage to speak up for the one she fell in love with. Maybe she will realize that she can trust her life to his truth, and that no matter what they do to her, they will not destroy her conviction or stop the work of her Jesus. That's why when a person gets to write another ending, she'll be up too long before dawn, not crying uncontrollably, but living freely when the rooster crows. So let it be.